HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Menopause Manifesto, Own Your Health with Facts and Feminism, by Dr. Jen Gunter. Read by Dr. Jen Gunter. Publisher's note: this audiobook refers to figures, appendices, and tables included in the print and ebook editions of the book. For every woman, your awesomeness is unrelated to your estrogen. Introduction. The Manifesto. If menopause were on Yelp, it would have 1 star. This establishment has temperature control issues, drenching heat followed by terrible chills, defies the laws of thermodynamics, would not recommend. Awful, awful, awful. Bleeding was scheduled, but was rebooked without notification, so arrived 3 weeks later than expected while I was in an Uber and I flooded the car. The driver gave me a terrible review. The sex was dry. And it's no surprise. Most women have no idea what to expect when they are no longer expecting a period. And it's uniquely awful and disempowering to not understand what is happening to your body and why. Menopause is like being sent on a canoe trip with no guidebook and only a vague idea where you are headed, although the expectation is it's awful. There will be no advice on how to get there or how to manage any of the obstacles such as rapids. That is, if any exist. Who knows? Have fun figuring it out. Good times. Oh, and don't write. No one wants to hear about your journey or what it's like when you arrive. Fear? Check. Uncertainty? Check. Medical ramifications? Check. Unpleasant symptoms? Check. Societal irrelevance? Check. No wonder menopause receives such awful reviews. The culture of silence about menopause in our patriarchal society is something to behold. Menopause doesn't even rate the shame that society gives to the vulva and vagina. Apparently, there is nothing of lower value than an aging woman's body, and many in our society treat menopause not as a phase of life, but rather as a phase of death, sort of a pre-death. What little that is spoken about menopause is often viewed through the lens of ovarian failure. The assertion that menopause is a disease that exists because women and their ovaries are weak. The only grounds for this claim are that most men don't experience menopause. But comparing women and men this way is the same as comparing the liver with the heart. The liver isn't weak or diseased because it doesn't beat like the heart, and women aren't diseased because the ovaries stop making estrogen. The absence of menopause from our discourse leaves women uninformed, which can be disempowering, frightening, and makes it difficult to self-advocate. Consequently, many suffer with symptoms or don't receive important health screenings or therapies because they have been dismissed with platitudes like, "This is just part of being a woman," or "It's not that bad." But the issues with menopause even go beyond these knowledge gaps and the medical neglect. Women tell me that menopause is lonely, that there are no stories or culture, and so there is no whisper network to take up the slack from medicine, nothing to offer comfort. But many women are desperate to know more about menopause so they can understand how and why their body is changing. And they want information so they can make decisions that work for them. They also want to talk about what is happening to their body. I contrast these experiences with my own. Having started medical school when I was 20 years old and my OBGYN training when I was 24, I can't remember back to a time when I didn't have a detailed understanding of the hormonal changes of both the menstrual cycle and menopause. And not just the biology, but how to apply it practically to my own body. I never once thought, "Wow, that is unexpected," or "Why am I sweating so much at the age of 45?" or "What is going on? Why am I bleeding everywhere?" My medical knowledge didn't prevent me from having menopause acne, hot flashes, or those special, heavy periods that are all typical of the menopause transition. But because I knew exactly what was happening and when to seek care, it made the whole process feel routine. because I knew the tests that were indicated and those that were not, and because I understood the medicine, it was much easier for me to navigate the treatment options and choose the safest, most effective therapy and avoid the snake oil. By the time I entered my own menopause transition, I had spent over 20 years speaking with women about their menopause and helping them manage their symptoms and any health concerns. So I had heard many stories, and I had knowledge of the range of experiences as well as the treatment options. It was fortunate that my view of the subject wasn't confined to what I saw at home. My mother's menopause was volcanic, and if that was all I had to go on, I would have been quite frightened. Online, on book tour for the Vagina Bible, and during many interviews with reporters, I often heard, and still hear today, "What do I do?" and "Where do I turn?" from women about menopause. I remember one interview in particular that had nothing to do with menopause or even menstruation, and when for some reason I tangentially mentioned I was using an estrogen patch, the conversation derailed and all the reporter wanted to discuss was menopause. Hearing over and over again from women from many countries about this need for knowledge made me obsessed with the idea that every person should know about menopause like a well-informed gynecologist. And so that is what I have set out to do in this book. For women to navigate menopause, they need facts because empowerment requires accurate information. But they also need feminism because our bodies, our medical care, and even our thoughts have been colonized by the patriarchy. The cultural absence of menopause from our discussions isn't because that's what women want. The often pejorative language about menopause and the medical neglect also aren't up there on the Meno wish list. Women often only hear the awful stories about menopause, but the truth is the menopause experience is a vast diaspora. Many women have mild symptoms, some moderate, and others severe. Often these symptoms are temporary, but occasionally they're long-lasting. Menopause does start a series of biological events that increase a woman's risk of several medical conditions, such as cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis. But menopause isn't the only paint on a woman's canvas. Age, other medical conditions, diet, exercise, and even adverse childhood events are also adding color to her portrait. So when a woman wants to consider what she should do, it's important to step back and look at the whole picture. Managing menopause is the ultimate exercise in whole body or holistic medicine. Menopause is not a disease. It is an evolutionary adaptation that is part of the survival of the species, like menstrual periods or the ability to suppress the immune system during pregnancy so the body doesn't attack the fetus. Like these other biological phenomena, menopause is associated with downsides. In this case, it's bothersome symptoms for some women and an increased risk of several medical conditions. But menopause also occurs while a woman is aging, so it's equally important not to brush off every symptom as hormone-related. It's vital that women know about menopause, but also everything that is menopause adjacent, so they can understand what is happening to their own bodies, put that in perspective, and advocate for care when indicated. A manifesto is a public declaration or proclamation, and we are well past due for a manifesto on menopause, as 2021 is the 200th anniversary of the introduction of the word. My manifesto is for every person to have the knowledge that I had to help them with their own menopause. I demand that the era of silence and shame about menopause yield to facts and feminism. I proclaim that we must stop viewing menopause as a disease, because that means being a woman is a disease, and I reject that shoddily constructed hypothesis. I also declare that what the patriarchy thinks of menopause is irrelevant. Men do not get to define the value of women at any age. If you are years from menopause, this book will hopefully help you understand the road ahead. My hope is that it allows you to view menopause as a phase of life, as well as inform you of the preventative health care that can be taken to lessen any impact of menopause on your health. In addition, may this book provide the knowledge to best manage your menopause with a view to your unique concerns. If you are already on Team Menopause, I hope this book helps you understand how you got here, biologically speaking, and informs you of important health considerations that may still lie ahead. It's never too late for preventative health care, and many symptoms and medical conditions may still need managing. And if you are in your menopause transition and experiencing that hormonal chaos, know for many women this is the rockiest phase. Often just that acknowledgement can help. I hope the information here helps you reframe what is happening to your body. And if you are suffering, I hope that you take comfort knowing there are many explanations for how and what you are feeling, as well as therapies. And these rapids won't last forever. My hope is that this book helps to hold your canoe steady so you can catch your breath. If you are transgender or non-binary, whether you will experience menopause or menopause-like symptoms depends on many factors. Trans men and many non-binary people who don't take hormones will experience the changes of menopause described here. Trans women who stop estrogen, as well as trans men and some non-binary people who take testosterone, may experience menopause-like symptoms. While I hope some information here may be helpful, the studies that informed this book enrolled women who have or had ovaries, and extrapolating the data to trans and non-binary people may not always be accurate. More research is desperately needed. Facts can bring order to the chaos and uncertainty of menopause, because knowledge can dispel fears and open up treatment options. Even if the option is to take no action, it is still a position of power because it is an act of self-determination. Feminism can help women see the biases that may have informed previous beliefs and reframe their menopause not as a terminal event, but as another phase of life. Women want more information about menopause, and that knowledge can reduce suffering. Knowing what's happening to your body and that you are not alone in your experiences is powerful medicine. Facts empower women to make the health decisions that work for them. You can't be an informed patient with inaccurate information. It shouldn't require an act of feminism to know how your body works, but it does. And it seems that there is no greater act of feminism than speaking out about a menopausal body in a patriarchal society. So let's make some noise. Part 1. Reclaiming the Change. Understanding your body as an act of feminism. Chapter 1. A Second Coming of Age. Why Menopause Matters. Menopause is puberty in reverse, a transition from one biological phase of ovarian function to another. But the way we view these two events couldn't be more different. Puberty is frequently a subject, or at least a co-star, in teen and young adult novels. Thank God for Judy Blume. It's often covered, the basics at least, in school biology curriculums and in sex education, although it is an unfortunate truth that sex education isn't universal or always accurate. Medical providers also check puberty milestones, such as breast development and the appearance of pubic hair, to make sure it's progressing correctly. And even the simple act of measuring height with a pencil on a door frame during a growth spurt is a basic affirmation of the existence of puberty. A coming of age, transitioning from childhood to teen or adult, is commonly celebrated or at least acknowledged in multiple cultures and or religions. Although as an aside, it's important to note that having menstrual periods does not magically transform a girl into a woman. Puberty is also a trigger for medical conditions, for example, acne, painful periods, and depression, and puberty even starts the chain of events that could one day lead to breast cancer. While the degree and accuracy of Puberty 101 may vary culture to culture, school to school, and family to family, Almost everyone is able to acknowledge its existence and generally manages to discuss puberty without making it a disease or framing being a child, the time of life when these conditions didn't occur, as the gold standard for health. Even though menopause is a universal experience for every woman with ovaries who lives long enough, unlike puberty, menopause is shrouded in secrecy. There is no menopause curriculum in schools, and providers rarely discuss it in advance. Typically, it's only after a woman has mentioned concerns that the "it might be menopause" conversation is raised. When menopause is discussed in Western society, it's often viewed negatively as a cruel joke or even a disease. This stems from the harmful belief that women lose value once they are no longer able to reproduce, and the false hypothesis that menopause is a biological flaw, as there is no equivalent for men who can make sperm into their old age. But if we looked at that argument from another angle, we might as well say that men are biologically flawed because they can't get pregnant or because they develop heart disease earlier than women. Also, let's be real. While theoretically men have the biological machinery to reproduce until they die, aging significantly impacts male fertility and a man's physical ability to be sexually active. When a cisgender male body is used as a so-called standard, it's easy to view the female body as flawed. This is a core tenet of the patriarchy. So let's set the record straight. Menopause deserves at least the same attention as puberty. I'd even argue more, and menopause is no more a disease than being a man is a disease. What is menopause? The word has nothing to do with men. It was conceived in 1812 by Dr. Charles Desjardins, a French physician who started with the word menopause, a combination of menes, from the Greek for month, and pausi, from the Greek for cessation, a common term for this phase of life. In 1821, Desjardins updated the term to menopause, with an accent over the E, and then somewhere along the way the accent was dropped in the medical literature. Menopause occurs when there are no more follicles in the ovaries capable of ovulating, meaning there are no more eggs. The average age when this happens is 50 to 52 years. One of the defining features is the dramatic drop in estrogen levels, as the follicles are the main source of estrogen. It's the drop in estrogen that causes many of the symptoms and medical concerns unique to menopause. However, there's new research that suggests other hormone changes that we'll discuss later are also important. Medically speaking, the menopause transition is the time leading up to the final menstrual period, or FMP. The FMP marks menopause, and everything after is postmenopause. As it isn't possible to know which period is the final one, well, until it's final, menopause is formally confirmed 12 months after the final menstrual period. The menopause transition is the period of time leading up to the final menstrual period that's characterized by hormonal fluctuations that result in irregular periods and symptoms such as hot flushes. There are two other common terms for the menopause transition: pre-menopause, which is interchangeable with menopause transition, and perimenopause, not to be confused with premenopause, which is indeed a separate term. Perimenopause is the menopause transition as well as the first year after the final menstrual period. The length of the menopause transition, or premenopause, can vary significantly woman to woman, and a hard start date isn't always possible to determine. During the menopause transition, there may be a lot of false finishes or gotchas, where a woman thinks she has had her last period and nope, not yet. And for others, the menopause experience can feel more like a gradual meandering process, or both. The only predictable thing about the menopause transition is its unpredictability. Adding to the confusing terminology is the colloquial way in which we discuss menopause. Many women and their providers often use the word menopause more liberally. For example, I'm going through menopause for the menopause transition, or I'm in menopause for the postmenopausal phase. I'm a fan of using the term menopause to encompass the whole continuum or experience from the menopause transition onward, as symptoms and medical conditions linked with menopause don't magically start or stop with the final period. The timing of the final menstrual period matters for research, fertility, and in evaluating abnormal uterine bleeding, but otherwise it's more of a footnote than the lead. Using the term menopause generally and being more specific about the relation to the final menstrual period when it matters medically feels like the best way to facilitate communication. The knowledge gap. Despite the universal nature of menopause, many women aren't well informed about the symptoms, the physical changes, the medical concerns, or their treatment options. This information vacuum has been created by a toxic combination of medical providers being unable to meet the educational needs of their patients, medicine has some serious communication issues, and medical misogyny, meaning medicine's long history of neglecting women. Consequently, women have their symptoms and health concerns related to menopause dismissed as being fabricated, unimportant, or just part of being a woman, meaning something to endure. But the societal shame extends beyond any provider's office. There is the general disdain for women as they age. Maybe disdain isn't the right word, since the concerns of women as they age are often so unimportant that they aren't even worth that minimal effort. They're simply ignored. As a teen, I read books where the character had her period or wrestled with bras, and there were a few cool moms in my group of friends who were willing to talk with us about menstrual products. My friends and I talked about periods among one another. It was exciting. I wasn't exactly sure why, but I was aware it was a marker of my relevance in society. I was reminded about these conversations on a recent trip home to Winnipeg when I had lunch with Tiffany, a friend from junior high school. What was our strongest shared memory? We were the last two girls in our group to get our periods. Me in the spring of 1980 and Tiffany a month later. In contrast, there are no coming-of-age stories for women in menopause. And the rare times when menopause is alluded to, it seems ubiquitously negative. Women often don't discuss menopause even among themselves. Possibly they are unsure of the facts or less likely to share, or they falsely assume most of the therapies are ineffective or unsafe, or even that there are no treatment options available. So why bother? In addition, unlike your first period, the final menstrual period feels like a dotage date. And who wants to be 48 and making plans for either graduating to a plucky lady detective who's forced to pass off her competence as a series of fortunate breaks, a vindictive matriarch exacting retribution for her societal impotence on all who cross her path, or an asexual homebody with an ever-increasing assortment of cats with questionable litter box skills? In the more than 25 years that I've been a gynecologist, the science on menopausal hormone therapy, MHT, has changed significantly, and effectively communicating how the science evolves is challenging. We're all comforted by certainty, but the truth is medicine largely operates in shades of gray. And what we in medicine believe to be true today could change when more research becomes available or new technology is developed to answer questions we never dreamed of asking. And then there are the headlines. Fear sells, and it seems as if much of what is covered in the lay press over-amplifies the risks seen with some therapies. In addition to the traditional news and magazines, women must also navigate the information of varying quality on social media. There is another matter of misinformation and even disinformation, as the unfortunate silence about menopause and the gaps in knowledge are exploited by both the pharmaceutical industry and those who sell supplements and other so-called natural products. Menopause, the basics. Most women will spend 1/3 or even 1/2 of their lives postmenopausal. If you include the menopause transition, then it's definitely 1/2. Currently, there are 70 million women in the United States who are 45 years or older, and worldwide that number is over 1 billion. As the population is aging because of lower birth rates, percentage-wise, the number of women in the menopause transition or who are postmenopausal is only going to increase. The hormone fluctuations that start in the menopause transition can trigger a variety of symptoms. For some women, these may be bothersome enough to treat. For others, having the knowledge that what's happening is typical may be enough. Thinking a weird body thing is uniquely yours is very disempowering. And many women are relieved simply to know their experiences are common and expected. It's also important women know what symptoms might be a sign of a more serious concern and what's annoying but not dangerous. For example, I was headed to Europe 8 months after my last period. As I'd had some significant hot flashes, I was sure I was done. I was stoked not packing pads and tampons. Then 5 minutes into the 10-hour flight, the seatbelt light was still on. Bam! I felt a gush, and my underwear was soaked with blood. I felt like Michael Corleone, Godfather 3, sitting on the airplane toilet muttering to my ovaries. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Changing underwear in an airplane bathroom, just another space not designed for menstruation, and using cheap airplane menstrual pads for 10 hours that resulted in an irritating vulvar rash at the start of my vacation was very bothersome. The amount of blood was not. Had I been embarking on a lot of international travel, I might have considered medication to help regulate my periods, because menstrual hijinks at cruising altitude are not my jam. That's why it's important for women to know all their options, so they can choose if they want treatment or not. Quality of life concerns aren't trite. It's medicine. Common symptoms that may be experienced over the menopause continuum will be discussed in detail throughout the book. Quality of life aside, menopause is also important because it's associated with a variety of health concerns, and these aren't a fringe part of women's health care. They're a central concern. Cardiovascular disease, which is linked with menopause, kills almost 400,000 women in the United States per year, or 1 out of every 3 women. For comparison, breast cancer kills approximately 40,000, and yet many women at average risk for both cardiovascular disease and breast cancer are far more frightened by breast cancer, even though cardiovascular disease is more likely to kill them. This isn't about disease favorites, for lack of a better expression. Rather, for perspective, it's about stepping back and looking at the entirety of the diseases that affect women. Sometimes I hear people talk about medical schools needing a menopause curriculum, but you can't separate women from menopause. The answer isn't to put menopause into a silo, because that forces women into silos. Instead, studies of medical conditions and medications need to include women of all ages, so we understand how to manage women's health across the menopause continuum. Menopause doesn't happen in a vacuum. One of the complexities of menopause is that it happens as we age, so sorting out hormone-related from age-related can be hard. In addition, we accumulate medical conditions over the years, and many of them have symptoms that can overlap with the symptoms of menopause. Let's consider a common menopause experience: difficulty sleeping. Sleep issues can also be age-related or due to a medical condition such as sleep apnea or depression. To add to the complexity, the menopause transition can trigger depression, and lack of sleep can worsen depression. And sleep apnea is also linked with depression. It's a medical Gordian knot. So a medical provider and a patient must ensure they've considered all the contributing factors and how they may be interrelated before assuming a symptom that develops during the menopause transition or during postmenopause is truly hormonally related. It's important that women are not brushed off with a "that's just menopause" or told hormones will fix everything, when in reality there are other medical conditions, some potentially serious, that are the root cause. There is another layer of complexity. Our health and how we age, not just the ovaries, but everything, are related to our macro environment. For example, diet, exercise, stress, personal relationships, or whether we've had children, and if so, did we breastfeed? Some people refer to these as lifestyle factors.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?